It's still going to be a while until I get my hands on an actual Battlefront Centurion sprue, but on Tabletop have showed one off in a video they released the other week. I'm still going to do a full review when I get my hands on it, but here's just a quick look at what's on the sprue. Hopefully on Tabletop don't mind if I reference their video. You should totally go watch it too. Stay with me. So this is what's coming. The Centurion tank platoon box for Nordic Forces in Team Yankee. It's a 5-vehicle platoon box due to be released August 26. This one box will make Centurion tanks for both Swedish and Danish forces, but there's plenty more options for different variants on the sprue. Given how widely Centurion was adopted, that just makes sense. There's even the option to build the Mark I with the 17-pounder gun and a 20mm Polston cannon. So let's look at the on-tabletop images. These are still images taken from their video, so the framing's not ideal and there's the occasional finger in the shot, but still worth a look. This is the best view we get of the main part of the Centurion sprue. As you can see, it's moulded in grey plastic. There's a lot of standard Battlefront plastic features here. One-piece tracks, open and closed commander's couplers, keying on the hull for the tracks and so on. From what I can see here, the moulding is sharp and well defined. I've been waiting for a Centurion in plastic for ages, and this one looks like it's not going to disappoint. This shot shows the other end of the sprue a bit more. Here, the major feature of note is the early turret. This has a more triangular shape than we're used to on a Centurion. It was initially armed with a 17-pounder gun. The mantlet piece here shows where the gun would go. Next to that is a separate ball mount for the independently movable secondary armament. This was either a 20mm Polston cannon or a 7.92mm Beezer machine gun. The 20mm cannon was intended to deal with lightly armoured targets, where the main gun would be overkill. Later marks dispensed with this independent secondary mount in favour of a simple coaxial machine gun. They're a bit blurry here, but there are several machine gun options for the tank. These seem to be an MG3 and a Browning machine gun for the commander's coupler, and an M250 caliber that seems to be on a mantlet mount, possibly for an Israeli variant. On the other side of the sprue is a 30 caliber Browning, also for the commander's position. This seems to give you guns for a lot of Centurion variants outside the Nordic Forces release. These should build vehicles for Fate of a Nation and NAM too. I was expecting there'd be variants here, so nice to see them on the sprue. There's also a wide range of main guns. There seems to be at least 5 different guns here. This is the Ordnance quick-firing 17-pounder, the same gun that was fitted to the Challenger and Sherman Firefly. Centurion started design in 1943, and this was the most powerful tank gun available at the time. You'll recognise the globular muzzle brake fitted to the end of the barrel. Next up is the 105mm L7 gun fitted with a thermal sleeve. This is the latest main armament Centurion received, and the one for use with most of the Nordic Forces vehicles, but it will suit some other nationalities as well. But most Centurions were built with a version of the 20-pounder gun, an 84mm gun which entered service in 1948. This version here is the Model A 20-pounder with a muzzle counterweight. Characteristically, it has a 2-step cone-shaped weight, but it's hard to see if this is reflected on the kit from this picture. Next to that is the Model B variant of the 20-pounder. This is recognisable by the fume extractor fitted partway up the gun. The extractor has 3 strakes on the top side, which you can't see here, but is definitely on the other side of the part. This is the version of the gun I'm going to need for my Australian NAM Centurions. However, testing of the 20-pounder gun against the armour of a captured T-54 showed the gun's penetration would be inadequate. This led to the development of the L7 105mm gun. That's our last gun here on the Sprue. This is the version without the thermal sleeve. Again, there's a fume extractor partway down the barrel. Including all these guns gives us Centurions from the very early production up to the final versions of the type. You also get engine deck options. The upper hull has a space for the engine deck, and you have two options. This one is for tanks fitted with the Meteor engine. Centurion was designed around the Rolls-Royce Meteor 4B engine. This was a 650 horsepower version of the engine used in the Cromwell and Comet cruiser tanks. You can even see the fishtail exhausts at the rear of the deck piece. Meteor was a remarkable engine, but as Centurions continued in service, a power plant designed in the Second World War left the tank underpowered. Many nations re-engined Centurion with alternative engines, often fitting Continental diesels as used in the M48 and M60 Patton tanks. The kit includes a raised engine deck to represent this modification. The profile of this deck is radically different from the Meteor deck, replacing the multi-part armoured covers with a larger hinged access panel. This shot gives you a better view of the upper hull. You can see the space for the engine deck pieces to slot into. Some of the stowage bins for the hull are also part of the engine deck parts, allowing different configurations with the different variants. The hull also has the vision ports for the driver, located just behind the sloped glasses plate. Centurion was one of the first British tank designs to make use of sloped armour. Sloping the front plate gives some increased protection over the same thickness of vertical plate. As I mentioned before, the kit has an early turret for the 17-pounder armed tanks. That's these parts here, plus some side and stowage bin parts. The shape and the mantlet of this turret is quite distinct from the later turret. Later versions use this turret. Again, it's a complex irregular shape, and its shape is modified even more once you add the various stowage bins and bustle racks. Without looking at the Sprue and assembly diagrams, I couldn't be sure, but I'm betting there are some options here too, different bins and racks for different versions. The other thing worth mentioning here are the ERA options. Centurions were often fitted with explosive reactive armour to increase their survivability. These parts here are the ERA blocks for the mantlet, turret top and hull front. I'm no expert on ERA armour, but this looks like the ERA to make the TSWBX02 for Sweden. That makes sense given the box set and release this plastic kit is designed for. Israeli Blazer ERA looks substantially different. However, Battlefront would just need to design an ERA upgrade sprue to add this capability, like they did with the T-72B. Tracks are one-piece parts, as is usual Battlefront standard. It's hard to tell what the track detail is like from the images we have, but we can see the Horstman-style suspension with pairs of road wheels. Most Centurions were fitted with side skirts, and they're an option here too. I won't be needing these for my Australian Centurion 5s. During operations in Vietnam, mud would build up and clog the suspension, so the skirts were routinely removed in theatre. This is just a quick look at the sprues, so I think we'll stop here. We've seen most of the options included in the kit. This is the finished kit, built as a Swedish TSWBX01, I believe. It looks like it goes together nicely. You can see the ERA blocks fitted, the 105mm gun with thermal sleeve, and the upgraded engine deck. The stowage bins really change the angular turret shape. This version doesn't feature the bustle stowage bins, but the Israeli and Australian versions use them. As I mentioned earlier, the Centurion platoon box set is due for release August 26. It will be sometime well after that before I get my hands on one through an Australian supplier, but when I do, I'll do a full review. Until then, I hope this quick peek at the sprues will answer some of your questions. You should also totally go and watch On Tabletop's video. Link in the description below. Thanks for watching. See you next time.